And please welcome to our community practice. Introduce yourself in the chat. And we are recording this for our website. So good morning. It's very rainy here where I am. I hope you're enjoying a little better weather, but we do need the rain. How's Sacramento, folks? Rainy?
Gray, but no rain, at least for me.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Introduce yourself in the chat. Let's get started. And welcome. And Justin, if you can help me let people in too, that'd be great. I'm kind of having a hard time multitasking. Welcome. And I have a few announcements before we kick off. I just want to remind everyone that this community of practice is a regional joint venture for the San Francisco Bay region in ECE and EDU. We are also part of Vision 2030. And this satisfies a few of the statewide goals with our sector focus. And one is building and expanding non-traditional apprenticeships. And I think that's why most of you are here. Meeting our sector technical assistance needs and supporting dual enrollment pathways, which we do by ensuring that folks have ease of recording and coding and registering and admitting students. So this is very related to our pathway work. I believe we have some K-12 folks on the Zoom also. And I know that some of you put in content related to K-12, so that would be helpful. We need our K-12 partners in this sector. I'll be introducing the panel, and then we will have an opportunity to chat. And I'm going to encourage all of you, as you're listening to panelists, to enter questions in the chat. They can answer you live, or we can defer the chat questions till later. Okay, so I'm Kathleen White. I'm the coordinator for the ECE EDU Regional Joint Venture in the Bay region. I'm just going to moderate this panel. The experts are going to take it away. We have Erik Cooper, Vice Chancellor on Workforce and Research at the Chancellor's Office. He will be leading off the presentation. We have Michelle Smith, who's a visiting Associate Vice Chancellor in Student Services with experience from Kern Community College District, which encompasses several colleges, and she'll talk to you about that. We have Sabrina Aguilar, who's a specialist in the Apprenticeship Office at the Chancellor's Office. We have Chris Allen and Fong Tran, who are from Foothill College, and they are our local apprenticeship representatives, and they're going to tell you both about their program and their experience with non-traditional apprenticeships and traditional apprenticeships. And then we have Justin Susi from Lauch Network, and they are entering our region. They have entered our region, have many colleges they support, colleges and other districts in the southern part of the state. And he'll talk to you about what their expertise has been in this sector area. And then John Dunn, who is in a plane right now and should be landing, might make it at the end. Then we'll have time for questions. And so our COPs are scheduled in partnership with the Chancellor's Office. So thank you all for being here and for providing your expertise. So quick announcements before Erik takes off. One announcement is, as part of this community of practice, we had our big Teach for the Bay conference last fall, and Tracy Burt, the conference coordinator, has created a playbook on how to do a virtual conference, and it really applies to any sector. I will be promoting that both at the region and at the state level, but the playbook would help any of you who want to create a virtual conference for students, and really in any sector, but obviously this one is a priority for us. So the playbook is completed and will be distributed shortly. Also, Justin, you'll be hearing from him later from Lauch Network, but I do want to lift the Bridge Apprenticeship. We have new standards for a teacher aide apprenticeship in education. with a collaborative between San Jose City College, Cabrillo College, and Hartnell. And it's really one of our first collaboratives in California that has this type of partnership and shared standards. And we're pretty proud of it. So proud of those colleges, and thank you to both CareerWise and Lauch Network for assisting. A reminder that this video, as well as the PowerPoint, is posted on our BACCC RJV site. And two last announcements before we kick off. One is that just a reminder to this group that due to Prop 28, we are experiencing both in our region and statewide shortages in arts education. This was the new arts education funding bill. And as all of you know, we had very few prepared teachers going through the pipeline in the areas of arts and dance because there just weren't jobs. With this new funding availability, we now have some shortages in arts ed. And we've kind of been drilling into our folks that, you know, we have our shortages in STEM, in CTE teaching, and in special ed. And districts are having a hard time finding credentialed art teachers, dance teachers, theater teachers, et cetera. So just, you know, another area to pay attention to. And John sent out an email. I'll just lift this. Of course, the budget could change dramatically in the next few months, but there was funding, and Sabrina can refer to this during her talk, a line item of additional funding for new CAI grants. So we'll see if that stays in the budget. Okay, I'd like to introduce Erik Cooper. Erik, you can talk a little bit about who you are and just tell me when you'd like me to advance your slides. And welcome, Erik.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see all of you on here, and definitely excited to talk about data and related things. So we're starting off with that in part to set the stage and kind of show where we are now and also where we want to be. So leading off with the Chancellor's office, my job as kind of somebody who is a bridge between the workforce development team at the Chancellor's office and the research team. My job is to help support with labor market research, help support with a variety of different projects. And for example, one of the things that my team has been doing over the last couple of weeks is looking at the wage outcomes for apprentices versus students in basically similar regular certificate programs at the college level. And what we find, at least in traditional apprenticeship pathways, is students who go through that apprenticeship do get a wage bump compared to their non-apprentice counterparts. No small part of that, right, is that apprenticeships often come with an alignment with an employer. So it's easier to know that those students are getting employed in their field of study, that they've got a living wage job lined up. So there are good things to be had there. We're doing some similar research with non-traditional apprenticeships as well. And at least the data that we've collected on some of the ECE apprenticeships that are already out there, the other education, I think San Jose City College, for example, those look promising as well, although we're still digging in. So we want to know, right, that apprenticeships not only are good pathways for students, but they lead to those good outcomes. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here today. The other piece of this, no, could you go back, please?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. But next slide. The other piece is to kind of show where we are now and where we're going. So in terms of the California community colleges, this is the count of students who are in apprenticeship programs over the last few years. So you can see we've been kind of in the low to mid 20,000 students. And if we follow a possibly achievable goal of increasing the number of students by 15%, we only need to get to about 27,000 or so apprentices in the California community colleges. Very achievable. Very, very achievable, especially as we add in those non-traditional apprenticeship pathways. However, next slide, please. If we take a look at what the governor has proposed in his roadmap, increasing the number of apprentices via the California community colleges, that goal becomes much, much more ambitious. And while we haven't fully negotiated kind of what our actual goal is going to be, if we take the governor via the roadmap for the California community colleges as kind of literal gospel truth, we'd be looking at something over 200,000 students in apprenticeship programs in the California community colleges per year. So there is a significant workload that's associated with building that number of apprenticeship pathways. Sabrina is asking me a question on the side. These are students who are actually enrolled and marked as apprentice students. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide in just a second. But again, just want to get to the scale of what is being asked of us, that there is a significant amount of work that could be done to help many of our students get into apprentices and hopefully meet journey status, and frankly, just getting into those living wage or high wage jobs, which is certainly a lot of our emphasis. So I want to focus a little bit on the next slide, which is what colleges need to do. So again, Sabrina asked me a question on the chat in terms of how are we sort of flagging these students? Well, for the community colleges, and sorry, K-12 friends, we are looking at a very specific set of indicators. And so this is one of the asks that I have of you for the folks like Rosario, who's at City College of San Francisco, is making sure that you're working with your IT teams, the folks that actually do the data submissions to the chancellor's office, to make sure that those apprentices are being flagged appropriately in your IT systems. So that way that information is being passed up to the chancellor's office accurately, and that way we can flag those and do those wage analyses that I was talking about, looking at the long-term outcomes for those students, so that we can look at the number of students who meet journey status according to the Division of Apprenticeship Standards. But this really becomes that key piece. And so if you are a department chair, if you're a dean at the community college, if you've got that responsibility for the program, it is going to be really worth it to talk to your registrar or admissions and records folks, and then also the IT folks that do the MIS reporting, to make sure that you've got really accurate flags for who those students should be. You'll note that we've got a couple of different categories in here. So very specifically, are they registered in an approved apprenticeship program? Great. How are you determining that at your college? Are they participating in a pre-apprenticeship program? Great. How are you indicating that at your college, and making sure that IT team really has clear documentation of what they should be reporting? And this is really key for us on this end, to really have a good count of how many students are being served, how many students are getting that good outcome, how many students are achieving a living wage, all of those pieces of information that we want to track. And so with that in mind, with that framing in mind, let me turn this over to my colleague, Michelle Smith.
Thanks, Erik. So Erik talked about the coding for MIS, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the coding for admissions and records and how it ties to apprenticeship. So Sabrina and I go way back. So we go way back to Bakersfield College, where I was over enrollment management and she did the apprenticeship piece. And we had to work really closely together to make sure that we were getting all the rosters and everybody enrolled and tagged and all of that. So next slide, please. So one of the things that changed is, and I believe it changed in 2019, is that you can report apprenticeship either on the 320 or the 321. And this is a little bit of information, and I'm going to pop into the chat the document that talks about how to, it's the official document that came from the chancellor's office on how you can code it, whether it be 320 or 321 reporting. So I think that's really important, because you could potentially be getting more money if you're having it allocated to the 320 instead of the 321, depending on your apportionment. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the coding that that we have done, this is a banner. We're a banner school in the Kern district. So apologies for not having PeopleSoft or Colleague or any of the other SIS systems. I didn't have access to them, but I would think that you would still have a way to code students similar. So this is a screen from Banner that tells you that you can go to the student attributes, where you would go in, and the next screen. So we can actually show you how we would go in and post it. So you would go in and you would put the student's ID number in and the term that you're wanting to put the attribute on the student, and then you would hit go. Go ahead and hit next screen. And then this shows you, well, it's kind of moved over a little bit, so it's kind of wonky, but you can see that on the top part, there's student cohort or there's student attributes. So you can decide if you want to put a student attribute on the student or cohort. We would normally do cohort because most apprenticeship students are going to be in a cohort together and are going to follow through in the classes. So we would add them to the cohort, and then we could track them. And you can also block out in Banner anyways, you can block out the students that are on that specific cohort to the specific apprenticeship classes. So not just anybody can enroll into those classes. So only if they have that cohort or that attribute would they be able to enroll into those classes. And then next screen. Oh, so it goes to Sabrina. So let me just finish by saying that once you have the attributes listed on the student, you can run reports to make sure that you have all of your students enrolled into those classes and you're following them. You can, we would always create a Cognos report that would pull the grades. We would check everybody to make sure that they were following along appropriately. And then we would make sure that the MIS coding was also entered in correctly for those classes. So we could cross-check to make sure that we were getting full apportionment for them. So that's the only thing I can really think of to say. Besides, it's really important to work with your admissions and records area. They can make sure that your student records are correct and that you know, they're providing the enrollment support that you need. It's really important to have good communication with them and let them know what's going on so that they can help with the coding if needed, and whatever requirements and deadlines are required for the enrollment and dropping of students. So I'll turn it over to Sabrina.
Thank you, Michelle. And I had just two questions that came to me for either you or Erik or both, which I think are relevant. I know we were going to save them for the end, but just a clarification that in this non-traditional apprenticeship, we do have general ed courses and courses where students are not in cohorts. So maybe if you could go into the non-cohorted coding. And then the other question, which I think is a big one for some of us, is do apprentices have priority enrollment at all? Can they seek priority enrollment? How would that happen? Especially in high demand courses where like in general ed or like in certain high demand courses where they need to get in.
Sure, and I can answer that. So if they're not part of the actual like cohort, they can be put into the attributes. You're still tracking them as an apprenticeship student. And that would work just as well. As far as priority registration, apprenticeship itself doesn't get priority registration. So they would need to fall into one of the designated priority groups in order to qualify for priority registration. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as we grow these numbers, maybe that could change. Because if we're really going to get to those numbers of apprentices in our system, I could see where it'd be a priority to get them into certain programs and classes.
So the first day, right, is set by the state, but after
Right.
that, the colleges have the ability to set up their own priority registration, right? So
Mhm.
they could set it up however they want to during that time period, but just on that first
Day.
priority day, yeah, they wouldn't be able to.
Okay, good. Thank you for answering those. All right. And please put questions in the chat for either Erik or Michelle. And we're going to move to Sabrina. And Sabrina is our apprenticeship specialist. And welcome, Sabrina.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Sabrina Aguilar, and I am the apprenticeship specialist / apprenticeship program lead for the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. Next slide, please. Okay, so my colleagues did a wonderful job in covering data and information regarding coding, especially from the California Community College District perspective. And so I'll go into a little further details about expectations from the Chancellor's Office, and more specifically from the apprenticeship department at the Chancellor's Office. There are overarching goals and expectations in addition to more specific ones when we get into the details of a particular funding source. But overall, we do want to see apprenticeship opportunity expansion. As I'm sure you all are well aware, Governor Newsom set a very ambitious goal of registering 500,000 apprentices in the state of California by 2029. And the state is currently at about 97,000 as of this morning. So as you can see, we do have some work ahead of us to achieve this goal. In addition to that, Chancellor Christian set a goal of registering about 200,000 apprentices within the California Community College system alone, which is what guides our office in the enrollment growth data that we review, similar to what Erik covered earlier in the presentation, as well as strategies on how we can get there. And we really can't do it without you. So we are investing heavily into statewide and regional contracts to expand our technical assistance providers, who will be tasked to provide support to each of the colleges at no cost, as the Chancellor's Office will absorb these costs. It'll also provide the opportunity to permit LEAs, including community college districts, the opportunity to become approved LEAs under statewide non-traditional apprenticeship standards, and significantly wrap up employer engagement efforts. So, formerly an apprenticeship administrator at a campus, I do understand it's not always easy to gain employers' commitment for onboarding apprentices, especially in the non-traditional sector. And if we could go back a slide, please. Right there, please. Yeah, thank you.
My mouse, I'm sorry, my mouse has a mind of its own this morning.
Oh, no worries.
Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, so in looking at ramping up employer engagement, especially in the non-traditional sector, we're looking at ways that the Chancellor's Office could strategize to support colleges to radically grow apprenticeship. And we're also encouraging colleges to seek partnerships with community-based organizations, workforce development boards, high schools for kind of a pre-apprenticeship to apprenticeship pathway, among other partners, so that we could creatively create these pathways and pipelines to register more apprentices. So in alignment with Vision 2030, we would also ideally like RSI related and supplemental instruction courses to be credit bearing and align not only with the DOL and DAS certificates, and or we have seen some LEAs choose to only receive DAS certification, which is a requirement, but many programs do receive the dual DOL and DAS certification. But we also encourage LEAs to align their apprenticeship pathways to an associate or even potentially a baccalaureate level degree at the California Community College level, depending on the pathway and the RSI within that program. In doing so, we are creating access opportunities by giving apprentices clear alignment towards higher education and degree attainment beyond the scope of their apprenticeship program by potentially including their RSI into an aligned pathway. I have heard from journey workers in the trades that they are interested in taking general education courses towards their degree because they don't want to perform physical labor for the entirety of their career, or they are interested in promoting to a leadership role. And we really make this possible through higher education. And another expectation or something we really want to encourage is the leveraging of credit for prior learning, or CPL. CPL is a significant factor which allows the colleges to meet students where they are and potentially give them credit for their their lived experiences and training. And this method has been shown to recruit additional students to college who might not have otherwise considered higher education. As part of our apprenticeship pathways demonstration project, CPL is a significant focal point. And if you are interested in learning more about CPL in the apprenticeship arena specifically, I do encourage you to take a look at some upcoming training opportunities in Southern California on February and March 21st. And so we're going to have a session dedicated to CPL, among other topics. So quick plug, if you're interested, that would definitely be a wonderful resource. Next slide, please. So we do use NOVA for a huge amount of reporting when it comes to apprenticeship, and two overarching concepts that the Chancellor's Office apprenticeship program oversees are RSI dollars and grants. RSI has two payment schedules, which are Schedule 2 for community college districts and Schedule 3 for K-12 LEAs, to include county offices of education as well. And with that, we also need RSI reporting to be completed in NOVA in a timely manner by both sets of RSI recipients, being Schedule 2 and 3. And we use RSI reporting for really two reasons. RSI is critical to our office. We ask that if LEAs are funding apprenticeships via FTES rather than RSI, which you can do that. Unfortunately, you can't receive funding via both sources, so it's one or the other. But there is a portion in NOVA under the RSI reporting section that allows you to enter the FTES number of hours that, number of apprenticeship hours that are being reported. And this is really critical for our staff as we form projections and we look at funding upcoming fiscal years, because we have seen that more and more colleges and LEAs are growing apprenticeship programs, which is certainly a great thing we want to see, but it has led to a bit of a shortfall in RSI dollars. So we do ask that you include your projections there, as well as the reporting periods listed on this slide, so that we can ensure we stay on top of this, that we submit any necessary budget change plans, and that we have adequate RSI funding to best support the field. We also maintain our California Apprenticeship Initiatives, or CAI grants, as well as our Apprenticeship Pathway Demonstration Projects, or APDP grants, all in NOVA. It is a requirement for all of the apprenticeship programs, which we fund, again, to be DAS approved and not just operate under DOL. So we do request information related to DAS file numbers or approved standards to show that that requirement is being met, as well as the registration numbers so that we could show that grant deliverables are being obtained as well. So we kindly ask that if you are a grantee of CAI or APDP funding, that you please keep your grant work plans updated. Feel free to decertify those work plans and update information. And then please just ensure that your fiscal reports are submitted on time and reflect the progress that you're making in your grant deliverables, because we really want to show all the amazing work that's being done through these investments so that we could continue to request additional funding. So a question that I receive very frequently is, when is the next CAI RFA? We don't have one solidified just yet. We are waiting to receive our fiscal year 2025-26 allocation prior to releasing our next CAI RFA. We're hoping that it's going to be around the fall of this year, but again, we have several steps in order to get to that point where we can provide an RFA to the field. We just made a request to the Department of Finance of $90 million in CAI funding. That doesn't guarantee that we're going to receive that, but it is a request that we are strongly advocating for. Next slide, please. Okay, so when it comes to funding apprenticeship programs, we have the two that we just mentioned, but there's also additional funding sources that could be in the form of grants that could potentially fund your apprenticeship programs. We encourage intentional braiding of funding as long as the same expenses are not being double funded, and to ensure that you are meeting required regulations pertinent to each funding source. So just some of the funding sources that programs could also take advantage of our apprenticeship innovation funding, which is overseen by DAS and offered in a support and a training model. It has been speculated that AIF funding might not be available after the current year, so please keep that in mind. But there are additional funding sources, and this here is not an all-encompassing list. So there's California Opportunity Youth Apprenticeship, Equal Representation and Construction Apprenticeships, and there's additional funding at the federal level and pertinent to specific industry sectors. So definitely leverage those sources. So when it comes to support, we do have with our NOVA team and product operations team, we do have an IT sector that can assist if you have questions. I encourage you to reach out to our team via email if you do have any questions. Our email is apprenticeship@cccco.edu, and we'd be happy to help. And we also host apprenticeship office hours every second and fourth Tuesday of the month from 2 to 3. And I plugged the link on that slide. So they're open office hours. You can drop in at any time, and we're happy to answer questions. And if you have any questions, even outside of those time frames, or you'd like to meet with us, the apprenticeship team, outside of those office hours, please feel free to email us, and we'd be happy to set something up. Next slide, please. So I wanted to pivot a little bit and show an example of some work being done at Fresno City College via our High Roads Construction Careers Partnerships grant. And so their work is being replicated by multiple HRCC grantees, and this shows an incredible work in action and putting CPL into perspective for pre-apprentices to apprenticeship pathway. So the MC3 is the multi-craft core curricula pre-apprenticeship program that introduces pre-apprentices to various construction trades, and it makes them more competitive applicants for the full apprenticeship pathway, application process in the building and construction trades. So Fresno City College, through the use of CPL, created courses that are aligned with the MC3 curricula so that they can go to MC3 graduates and inform them that they have the opportunity of receiving college credit through CPL for the work that they are already doing. In doing so, this method will introduce them to higher education and grant college units for something they were going to do anyways. So this is something we definitely want to highlight and encourage folks to look at potentially replicating at their sites. Next slide, please. So Michelle did a wonderful job in looking at the coding from a California community college perspective. And I'll go into just very briefly the K-12 perspective on pre-apprenticeship. I'm certainly not an expert on using CalPads, so I do want to preface that. But we do have some partners within their K-12 system that use CalPads, and it's very similar to Banner, Colleague, or PeopleSoft from the K-12 sector. So CalPads is California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System. It's used to evaluate programs, assess student achievement, and create reports for state and federal agencies. And it looks at a number of variables, including test scores, courses and grades, and demographic information. Next slide, please. And there's also a component of CalPads, which specifically tracks work-based learning and activities. So definitely take a look at that if that is applicable to your LEA. When it comes to RSI funding for apprenticeships, because RSI funding does not fund pre-apprenticeships, this process is overseen by the LEA specifically. So we do need the information to be entered into NOVA, as I mentioned before. We, for funding purposes, don't use CalPads, but this would be more something that is internally tracked by your specific LEA site. Next slide, please. Okay, perfect. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Before we move to our next presenter, I had two quick questions for you, Sabrina, and Michelle, if you want to weigh in also. You did mention that there will be a request for additional RSI dollars, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is that a priority request? I've heard that it was.
It is. So looking at fiscal year 2022-23 and 23-24 shortfall, we're at about, off the top of my head, I want to say it's about $6 million in shortfall. And so we're prioritizing getting a budget change plan submitted so that we could address that shortfall as well.
Okay. And the second question I had, if you could clarify before we move on, is you mentioned BA alignment. In this sector, there are a number of efforts to connect apprenticeship at the community college level with the pre-apprenticeship at the high school level, the community college apprenticeship with BA or BS acquisition. As you know, we don't really have any apprenticeships in four-year colleges that in this sector, but the teacher apprenticeship effort is growing. And so what you meant was that our apprenticeships can actually include RSI through the BA level, or could you explain that a little more?
Yeah, so not necessarily. We encourage alignment to that pathway, and that's a perfect example that you provided in the ECE realm. If there is an opportunity to connect a K-12 partner for a pre-apprenticeship, lead to an apprenticeship program that is led by California community colleges, that would provide apprentices kind of an on-ramp towards a BA degree or BS degree, depending on the pathway. So not necessarily the RSI will continue into the undergraduate level, but it is an aligned pathway. So it really depends on the specific academic area and the RSI required of that particular program.
Okay, so you develop the goal of a BA or BS, but it's not necessarily supported after they graduate from the community college.
Correct. And I'll give a quick example of something that we did over at Bakersfield College. Is we had a industrial automation baccalaureate degree that was offered at the California community college level. And so what we did is we partnered with early college. They had dual enrollment classes at several high schools that included some industrial automation lower division courses, which were also some courses that were required of our maintenance technician apprenticeship program. So some students coming out of the dual enrollment sector could have completed some of these RSI courses, and they would get credit and be more competitive applicants to enter the apprenticeship program in maintenance technician. And so as they're achieving the rest of their RSI courses in that particular program, they also align to the full associate and even the baccalaureate degree pathway at Bakersfield College, because the courses were aligned within that particular pathway. So just as an example.
Okay, I get it. All right, thank you. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to add, since you mentioned credit for prior learning, I have been meeting with the credit for prior learning group, and in our sector, because actually, there are specific courses that are required that are not easily translated into credit for prior learning. We do have some limitations around that, maybe in the work experience area, the field work area, but as related to our permits, our credentials, our external child development permits and our external credentials, there are specific courses that are actually named and listed. So it makes credit for prior learning a little bit harder in this sector. And those of you who are on this call who know our pathways can probably imagine that it might be hard to grant credit for non-credit bearing courses in this sector. So I just want to mention that it's a bit more challenging. Okay, well, thank you, Sabrina. And Sabrina and Michelle are both on to take questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. And we're going to move on to our next set of speakers. I'd like to introduce Chris Allen, who's the Dean of Apprenticeship Programs, and Fong Tran, Apprenticeship Programs Coordinator at Foothill College. And they are, I would say, a powerhouse in our region, and they can tell you why in a second. So welcome, Chris and Fong, and here's your first slide.
Oh, wonderful. And good morning. Thank you, Kathleen. And good to see so many familiar names on this call. Our apprenticeship community is small, so it's really nice to see everybody today. I guess we'll start with our first slide, which is really our partnerships with the building trades. Foothill College has a large apprenticeship program, way before my time. We've actually tracked it down to a little bit over 40 years, where we found a document that was typed up from a typewriter that was a contract with our local 104 sheet metal program. So it really speaks to the institutional knowledge around apprenticeship at Foothill College. And we're fortunate that we're able to be laser focused on apprenticeship. Our apprenticeship division is a division at our campus, very similar to your STEM or your BSS or your language arts. We have our own curriculum committee, and we are a division with the infrastructure of some outstanding coordinators. And my colleague Fong Tran here will be sharing her expertise in all the great stuff she helps me with, because I have all these great ideas and there's like 50 steps to do in order to do all that. So really appreciate her. We have 8 building trade partners here, as you see, in all different building trades. Local 62, 467, 6332, and really throughout Santa Clara County, San Francisco County, the East Bay, and down to Monterey County. We really value our partnerships with the building trades. We're very active. We attend all JETCs. And we're very much in partnership with all of them. And so it's wonderful to be able to get in your car and drive to a different county and see a Foothill College sign up in a training center and really kind of say, welcome. It's almost like a family atmosphere for us. So what we do have here on the bottom is 2 unique apprenticeship programs on our campus. Foothill College did register 2 programs with the Division of Apprenticeship Standards. We are the Foothill, we are the sponsor for these programs, as also the LEA, which is a little bit unique. So our dental assistant program was registered back in 2022. We've had successfully completed 2 cohorts. It's an apprenticeship pathway that we have partnered with over 50 dental offices here in Santa Clara County. Who knew there was a dental assistant shortage? I think when you have employer buy-in and you identify that need in your county and your surrounding area, the employer piece is such a big critical part of really being a successful apprenticeship. We've had to suspend our dental assistant apprenticeship temporarily as we work out some internal processes, but we're excited to be getting back and getting our 3rd cohort up and running. And then recently, our early childhood education apprenticeship, we registered with Division of Apprenticeship Standards in 2023. I'm happy to say that we have 9 apprentices. We launched last year, and just excited for that. Our program director, Nicole Kirby, does a fantastic job in working with local employers. We have our first self-assessment evaluation with Division of Apprenticeship Standards going on as we speak. We have to submit it next week. So a lot of partnerships here locally in such a critical field of ECE. Next slide, please.
Congratulations on your 9 participants. That's great.
Thank you. Yes. And really what you see here is all the certificates and AS degrees that we provide. All of our programs, all of our courses in the programs are credit bearing. We do have certificates for each of the building trades program, and we have 8 associate degree pathways as well. We have done a lot of efforts in helping our building trades partners take advantage of the associate degree pathways. And so we're really excited about some of the work we've been doing with them, but we have been in credit bearing for quite some time. We issue over about 400 certificates of achievement for our building trades partners annually, and a lot of wonderful events to celebrate the apprentices' accomplishments in the building trades. So we have quite a few to go to throughout the year. Next slide. And really just some quick numbers here. We're the 3rd largest allocation. Thank you to the Chancellor's office for their trust as we do work closely with their building trades partner. We report anywhere between 420 and 500,000 positive attendance hours. That really determines on the economy and apprentices being called up and classes being held. A little bit slower the last 2 years as the economy slowed down for the building trades, but we're starting to see trending back up. So we'll start to see those hours increase from the last 2 years. And like I said, I did have originally 35 years as an LEA. My colleague wanted to say, nope, it's been 40 plus years, and she's correct. And really that's just the partnerships that we've had over the years and a focus to really supporting our apprenticeship community here in Santa Clara County in the Bay Area. Next slide.
And can I add, we had hand raised. If you could put your question in the chat, that'd be great. We are monitoring the chat. And let me go to the next slide.
So with that structure and the infrastructure, we have another colleague who's another apprenticeship program coordinator. We are just focused in on apprenticeship, and that allows us to really explore new and innovative apprenticeship pathways. Our building trades partners are always front and center. We provide that customer service as they deserve it. We're also going to explore what we can do in new and innovative pathways. And it really began in 2022 when we received a CHI grant for both pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship to support the advanced manufacturing industry, specifically the semiconductor industry, as we were staying pretty close to the CHIPS and Science Act legislation that was moving through committees back in 2022. And as we sit here in Silicon Valley and think about workforce development, we were really anticipating local employers in the semiconductor industry to be interested in maybe an apprenticeship pathway. And we worked closely with five employers who became their own apprenticeship program sponsors. We serve as the LEA. We're anticipating onboarding 3 additional employers to have a total of 8 in the semiconductor industry. We designed a couple of new courses for them in partnership with the industry. And then the employers are the program sponsor, so they do the hiring of their apprentices. We just had our first graduation in December to celebrate the first cohort of process technician apprentices in California with our partners Applied Materials and Infinera. It's a consortium. We've added a couple of more employers and a couple of more community colleges, and the group of 5 became about 18 now that we meet still on a stand-in basis to really work on our programming and to scale what we're doing specifically in the semiconductor industry. I don't know if John Dunn made it off the plane yet, but thanks to him, we are actually in partnership with Goodwill Industries. We received another CHI award to help support their retail sales management pathway. And the vision here really is to provide support and structure to their employees and the populations that they serve, and really an on-ramp to higher education. And then we had our first cohort graduate this past summer. And it was just wonderful to see what their next steps are. The apprenticeship allowed them to be back in a college classroom, or it could have been the first time that they're in a college classroom and gaining that confidence. And so that apprenticeship is really what springboarded them to move on to other pathways that they were moving through. And then we're going to help them build a management apprenticeship, a stackable pathway for their employees that will move into a management role from their retail sales. So we received that CHI grant just recently, and we're doing that planning grant and getting ready to register with the Visual Apprenticeship Standards, that pathway. What you don't see on this slide are 2 other grants that we're working through, but I do want to highlight the Apprenticeship Pathways Demonstration Project. We are a recipient of that as well, and we've been doing some really innovative work around CPL. We just recently did our reporting in January and really excited about that work. And really thank you to the Chancellor's office that it gives us that ability to expedite the work we've been doing over these last couple of years. So really excited about that. I see my colleagues at De Anza College here, Katrina Tran and Vince Chaco, Foothill De Anza, along with Ohlone College, Mission College, and Evergreen Valley College. Just recently received the Department of Labor Strengthening for Community Colleges grant in January. This is a consortium of all of our local community colleges here in Silicon Valley, really working in collaboration with their advanced manufacturing programs to support the industry, and really starting to build out some bridge programs and identifying different occupations. And each of our colleges have such great programs. And we felt that being in collaboration with one another allows us to compete here in Santa Clara County and Silicon Valley. So that's a recent award that we got in January, and super excited about that work. We have our first kickoff meeting actually after this. Gonna go pick up the lunch and bring it over so we can celebrate and break bread together. And then before I pass it along to my colleague Fung Tran, I do want to highlight her and her leadership. We did put forth a baccalaureate degree proposal in construction project management. We have moved through the process and met with our colleagues at the CSU. Thank you for the support to the Chancellor's office for facilitating those meetings in November. It really is a pathway for our building trades to move from apprenticeship all the way through an advanced degree and a baccalaureate degree. I think we had two systems running parallel for too long, and really trying to do what other countries do so well is kind of have higher education layered into apprenticeship. And I think our meetings were very successful. We got some good feedback from our colleagues at the CSU, and we have a conditional approval, and just hopefully waiting for that approval here in the upcoming months. But that work could not have been done without the vision and leadership of Fong Tran. She was just incredible. And so I'd like to turn it over to Fong to talk about all the things that she does to make it all work. And it's pretty incredible because we kind of stumbled along the way to figure this all out as we started to become a program sponsor with our two on-campus apprenticeship programs. So Fong?
Great, thank you. And I'll advance the slide in 1 second. I just want to know, Chris, before you sign off, obviously you have the largest program in our region. Can you just give us an idea of your staffing, how many humans it takes to manage? Because we have a lot of folks on this call who have smaller programs or they're just starting out. So what is your labor requirements? And then I have one quick question, and then we'll move to Fong.
That's a great question, Kathleen. Infrastructure is so important. And for the last 5 years, you've been looking at the two people who were doing all of that. Fong and I were the two.
Okay.
We were able to bring on a new FTE, which is another coordinator. And I can tell you the difference between having another set of hands to do this work has been incredible. So there's a team of 3 in our apprenticeship division. We are under the Foothill College Workforce Development department, but for apprenticeship, Fong I and our colleague Karen A are the ones that work through all of our apprenticeship programs.
Okay, and so for 5 years, it was just the two of you. So that's pretty impressive. I had an idea for your next new and innovative apprenticeship. So we're going to need, for all these new pathways that all the colleges are engaging in, we're going to need more career technical ed teachers. So I'm suggesting a CTE teacher new and innovative pathway for community colleges and high schools, especially in the areas like AI and, you know, some of these new, really new emerging areas. I always think, who's going to teach that class? And how do we start developing them? So that's my idea. Let's move to Fong, and we will be able to talk about this a little more after. So thank you, Chris.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fong Tran, Apprenticeship Program Coordinator. A lot of I see for the past few years, a lot of colleges actually starting consider register their program as apprenticeship, or think about consider register their program as apprenticeship program. But there's a lot of barriers for the colleges to basically wanting to engage in apprenticeship, right? Because the funding, the cost, the additional work that we need to do to basically make apprenticeship work. So when we talk about funding and how can we scale it, how can we make it more productive for the college instead of costing the college a lot more running those apprenticeship programs. So at the college level, there's discussions like when the division dean or the director of the program think about, okay, whether or not we can collect apportionments or as an apprenticeship. So this is a coding that you will need to decide during your curriculum process. If you decide to basically using your existing courses within your program and then add those as to your registered apprenticeship, and you are on apportionment, all you need to do is basically create a unique section letter so that you can differentiate apprenticeship program from the regular sections. But if you decided to use to report it on the 321 report, you will need to code it as an apprenticeship at the curriculum level in order to show up on the 321 report. Otherwise, it will not show up on the 321 report. Or if you, at the college level, you have an option to make sure all that coordinations need to be done if you decide to not coding appropriately in a, you know. So that's one thing. And a lot of times we recommend for apportionment colleges to use the same classes that you have for apprenticeship in the apportionment. But if you're basic aid colleges, then you might consider doing a 21 report because that is considered Fund 15 for us. Campus-wide decisions, there's a campus-wide talk discussions you will need to have with Office of Instructions, the Scheduling Office, Divisions, A&R, Institutional Research Office to make sure that we all have the same understanding when it comes to section. If you decided to designate a letter to be used in the section number for your apprenticeship, make sure you have that discussions so that all the college, all the stakeholder at the college understand that is the letter that you'll be using that to designate for your apprenticeship classes. So that when we run report, we're just running that letter so that all apprenticeship classes and related to students will show up in that reporting. That's what we use at the college. We actually designate a letter A in a section number when we decided to schedule a course, an ECE course for an apprenticeship where we have, and then where we schedule a separate section for general students and apprentices to join in the same class. So we create two sections. One is for apprenticeship, one for general public to join in the same class instead of have them enroll in, instead of like creating a class itself for the apprenticeship. And that will actually increase our productivities in that way. For cohort, this is if you decided to use a cohort code for apprenticeship, for apprentices in your apprenticeship program, that will be decided at the division level. And then you can work with A&R to establish that cohort code for your program, for registered apprenticeship program. Next slide. So this one here, we'll talk about, this is very technical. So for all the students in the registered apprenticeship program, they will not assessing any fees. So there's no enrollment fee will be charged to those apprentices in the registered apprenticeship program, right? So all the classes at the when we schedule those classes, we also use banner at Foothill De Anza. So when we schedule those classes, we actually waive the tuition at the course level. So that when a student registers into that class, the tuition will be automatically waived. You can do that, or you can do that at the student level to waive all the associates classes that they register. So make sure this how you want to coding them. So for us, we actually waive it at the course level so that any students who register in this apprenticeship course will be waived. So that's one key. This is the banner system. We use a SAWSEC. Next page. So in the schedule classes, the next page would be is called SORAS, is part of the class schedule that we actually we only include the students in this cohort. In a cohort, the cohort code that we use for dental assisting, for example, is DAAP. So in our course schedule, we actually only accepting student in this cohort to be registered in this class. Any general student will not be able to register this class because it's restricted to general students. It's only include student in this cohort to be registered. This is at the course level. Next page. This is similar information to Michelle presentations earlier regarding to a cohort code used for an apprentice. In a cohort code, as we use the same thing, the page is GASAT is something that Michelle has shared earlier, and we have the same cohort code that we use for students. So this one here, once they get into the program, we put them in a cohort code. And when they exit the program, we just put an end date to their graduation or to whatever the termination, when we terminate their cohort or the term. It's aligned with the course that we put in the cohort code for the course, and then this is at the student level that we actually put a cohort code for any apprentices who are in the program. So, and then cohort code put in, and you save, and that's the next page. Oh, that's I think that's it, right?
Yeah, that was it. Thank you. Thank you, Fong.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Justin, when he comes up, Justin, we had a few questions around tracking individually. Because as we stated in this non-traditional apprenticeship, we have a number of students going through general ed courses, and there might be only 3 or 4 of them in a class, or 5 or 6 in a GE course. So Justin, I know you had something on tracking individually in your presentation. So I'm going to introduce Justin, and Fong and Chris. Thank you so much for Foothill College. We appreciate your expertise.
Hi everyone. So before I answer that question, I'm taking it on the lens of myself being a former instructional manager within the CTE division at the community college, presenting on best practices that I've had, and now also as a lens of being a regional sponsor hosted out of the Foundation of California Community Colleges, particular to tracking, just kicking it off. I'm seeing a lot of Banner on the screen, and I use Banner as well. What we would do is track special populations. So through Banner, through SAGSAT or SGA, SAAD, you can track by term, and I would track by semester. And so we do this with EOP&S, DSP&S, TRIO, Promise Grant, other retention programs where we can isolate the student. And through that, there is a mechanism, there's Scotchar, there's ways to export and identify students via ID, and then you can look at the courses that they have taken or have registered into. That is one of the best ways to track students individually, especially if they're a registered apprentice, registering a la carte into the catalog or the course schedule. If you're closing sections, if you're saving seats, if you're shadowing or mirroring sections, it's a little bit different. But that is one of the better practices in regards to individual tracking. Michelle, I know you're from the Chancellor's office. You're very familiar with Banner. If you wanted to add to that.
Well, I mean, I do know Banner very well because I'm from the Kern district as well before going to the Chancellor's office. So, I'm sorry, Justin, what specifically was the question on that?
Through Banner, how to track individual students or special populations of students taking courses in the general schedule.
So, I mean, and I posted it in the chat as well, but they can still be assigned the cohort code, right? And take other classes outside of just the apprenticeship classes, depending on how you have the schedule set up. So if you have it set up where only that cohort of students can take only the apprenticeship classes, then that would be that would limit them, right? So you would have to then maybe add like on an attribute code or something like that. Maybe Fong has some other help there. It's been a while since I've actually had to go in and code them.
So one thing is, according to the Chancellor Office requirement, we are required to register apprentices separately or enroll them in a separate course. So for us, for the tracking system, so for tracking purposes, we can only track them of completions of a program through the cohort code, right? So we set up the cohort code and set up what is the progress of completions of this program. So that's how we track them individually. If they decide to take additional classes beyond apprenticeship, it's really hard for us to track that way because there's a lot of possibility that we need to add it for towards completions of additional program. We can only be able to track it within the apprenticeship using the cohort code and progress completions that way, because we already know the classes required, right? So that we can ask our technical team to run a progress report.
Mhm. So let me just, before Justin kicks off, Justin, you can clarify this too. If a GE course is part of the apprenticeship plan, though, you had suggested the shadow coursing. And I know that creating 2 sections within a same course.
Yeah. So there's 2 ways. So I'll give automotive as an example. That's a big non-traditional apprenticeship program. We have automotive students in community colleges that, based off what's available, they're registered and flagged as an apprentice at that college, but they register into that course section on their own, and the college tracks that as an apprentice and waives that apprentice's individual instructional fees, tuition, mandatory fees by way of Ed Code and Labor Code and Title V, right? So that is happening in the state. In regards to GEs, that's a little bit different, but within the DAS profile, and if it's part of the programmatic curriculum, course mapping competencies to RSI provided by the college, then it goes on the DAS 24 through the LEA letter, and it is approved to be waived because it's approved by the sponsor, which could be external or internal of the LEA, agreed by the LEA, and agreed by the partnered employer. All right, I'm so sorry. We are running out of time, so I'll save all the questions for the group, and then I will just jump into the slides, Kathleen. Awesome. So, Justin, the Associate Director of Launch, I know we're going over coding, but I'm going to take it a little bit in regards to a programmatic lens through sponsorship. Kathleen, next slide. And so how does apportionment offset waived fees? First, in terms of title, Ed Code and Labor Code, a registered apprentice through DAS is not allowed to be charged fees, right? So the community colleges are very familiar with this. We waive fees all the time through the Promise Grant, through Justice Involved, CCAP. And so it is no different in regards to tracking that, but we waive fees and we utilize apportionment to offset that, so we have a net zero loss to the college. That is extremely important to know. So reimbursement through apportionment, the way that we tap into apportionment through waiving of fees, the college must either is eligible but ineligible in 2 ways. If they are a basic aid campus or unfunded FTE campus. At that point, RSI, contract scholarships is the best way to approach it, but you cannot be in those designations to qualify for the 320 and apportionment. So I do have a duplicated header here, but basically this is to eliminate barriers to make sure that apprentices have the opportunity to work and augment their curriculum at the campus. And through this investment, we have seen at the state level that as they go into the workforce, that investment really stimulates the economy. And so we utilize apportionment to create that net zero loss. Next slide, please, Kathleen. And so the relevant education codes to remember as you are implementing coding and waiving of fees, Ed Code 76300 is the one that exempts enrollment fees for apprentices. Every college has APs and BPs associated to Ed Code, and so every college should review those and make sure that they have the appropriate amendments if necessary to encompass apprentices if you're not having apprentices on campus. Apprentices then are allowed or enrolled in any credit apprenticeship course is exempted. And through an apprentice, that also means both resident and non-resident apprentices participating in a program. Through a DAS registered apprenticeship program, they gain their residency through the employer that is partnered with DAS. Now, this gets a little bit tricky in regards to the 320 reporting, so I put that on a separate slide, but just to note, both residents and non-residents qualify for the non-tuition non-resident tuition fee waivers. And the ed code that cites non-resident tuition fee waivers for apprentices is 76-380. And then the labor code that wraps this all up is Labor Code 3074, which makes sure that a state-approved apprenticeship program, a DAS registered apprenticeship program, that must be aligned with both the community colleges and DAS to ensure that the courses are eligible for apportionment reimbursement. Kathleen, next slide, please. And so key apportionment considerations. The thing is we have to make sure that DAS approval is a key factor. A lot of colleges who are starting to navigate into the space, of course, one of the best practices is to seek dual registration, DOL and DAS. And DOL is much faster than DAS. However, DOL approved programs are not eligible for apportionment or the protections of fee waivers. So keep in mind, DAS approval is a key factor. Of course, we kind of touched on this in terms of non-apprenticeship courses. So when we're talking about apprenticeship courses and we're mapping them to standard files, which is basically the occupational portfolio of an apprenticeship program, a college maps their curriculum with faculty, with the appropriate personnel, to the work competencies or the skills competencies that are provided in the standards, right? And then as the college agrees on what those courses are, that really dictates what the apprentice must take and what is waived in terms of ed code and labor code. Now, there are students that deviate from that. I'll give you an example. We have students that may be a community health worker or in a community health worker registered apprenticeship program and are taking other courses. Maybe it's an enrichment course like coding or something like that, or computer literacy. That doesn't necessarily have the protections of the apprenticeship waiving of fees, right? So it's extremely important that if a college is having apprentices and they're taking multiple courses beyond the instructional curriculum set forth in the standards and in the LEA agreement and the LEA letter, that they talk with the appropriate community chancellor's office representative to make sure that they are in alignment in terms of what they're reporting via MIS and the 320. Any exemptions from this or any deviations of this path must be consulted with the chancellor's office for approval. I listed some ed codes again. I think these are the guiding lights in regards to what we've referenced in terms of how we implement programs and stay in compliance with both state agency and accreditation. So please, as you have this presentation, review those ed codes as you start to implement programs. Kathleen, next slide. So coding of apprentices, as we know, this is different than the MIS system. Ultimately, colleges can claim FTES apportionment if the course is on the academic schedule and the student's attendance is not fully funded by another source. So if you're funding courses through a KI grant, through a foundational grant, through an external fund, generally we do not code those students into the 320 report. Apportionment is not allowed if the cost of the students apportionment is not allowed if the cost for the student's instruction are wholly funded by any external source. And so I gave some general examples here. If you're thinking about the 320 report and encoding them, if an employer pays full tuition, generally that's not apportionment. Contract or grant, not an apportionment. There are some things called partial grant or partial college support. If that is happening, I do highly suggest that you reach out to the apprenticeship team at the chancellor's office to see if you're eligible. Fong, I see your hand up.
So actually, let's say that you have a course that actually going through the apportionment already. You can, at the schedule, when you schedule class, you can exclude that particular course from apportionment when you receive, you know, when you receive additional, when this is funded by the KI grant or any grant that the chancellor office is offer, so that there's a section in the schedule that you can exclude from collecting apportionment.
Yep.
When you schedule that class.
That's true.
Thank you, Fong.
And so as we work with our data stewards, institutional research, and of course, coding has to be accurate, right? So making sure that we're on tabs. I do it when I was at the colleges, I did it by semester in the non-traditional space because students will come and go. And so making sure that the data is accurate so that you're appropriating the allocation correctly in the 320 And that is a screenshot of the 320 in terms of that section. That is part 9, I believe, of the 320 report. Kathleen, next slide. So coding of non-resident apprentices. This is something that's a little bit tricky, and it took me a little bit when I was at the colleges to kind of master. And so with non-resident apprentices, although they are flagged as non-resident at the community college, as they take or as they enroll or are a part of a registered apprenticeship program, they are seen as residents. And so the courses that they are taking are eligible for apportionment reimbursement. Any courses outside of that is generally not eligible for apportionment because they have to go through the influx of the fees being a non-resident. However, because of the way that the box is set up in the 320 report, you can claim all the instructional hours, the census contact hours into that report. So that's something to note when you're working with students who may be not DACA students, but international students, students who are seeking asylum, things like that. It is available to that student. So it is a protection. Next slide, Kathleen.
Thank you. That was very clarifying. I didn't even know that you could waive the out-of-state fees, or non-resident fees. So thank you.
Yeah, only the ones that are prescribed in the LEA letter, the curriculum ID form, and then map to the DOS file or the DAS file. Now, one thing that Kathleen wanted me to just touch on very briefly is a pre-apprenticeship framework. So pre-apprenticeship is starting to become very important, especially as students are tapping into or exploring trades or non-traditional occupations. And so this really helps, especially in the general student population. Students can change their major like many times. The average is between 3 and 6 right now. And so this really helps to solidify the retention, persistence, and completion of a registered apprenticeship program through the pre-apprenticeship framework. One thing to consider is pre-apprenticeship courses are not protected under the fee waivers. So ensuring that best practice, we find ways through partnerships, through non-credit, through dual enrollment, in order to create our pre-apprenticeship design. But it is a very good exploratory tool and creates fundamental knowledge for the appropriate occupation. And with that, next slide, Kathleen. And across the board, these are the colleges that are implementing non-traditional programs. There's over 30 LEAs in the pipeline across the state, from the IE, DRC, all the way up through the Bay Area. And so this is a cool and new and innovative space for non-traditional apprenticeship programs. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Kathleen.
Okay, thank you. I've gotten a few questions in the chat. John has not signed on, so he may still be in the plane. So I think we're going to forego that since we're at the last part of our COP. But I had a few questions I wanted to throw out to either Foothill, Justin, Michelle, whoever would like to answer. And this has to do with other fees. So if apprentices owe back fees on a back fee on a book or something, or other registration fees, what fees can actually be paid? And Sabrina, are these allowable for a CAI grant holder if an individual can't register because they have other fees as described?
I think it depends on the college campus, right? And their set policies on being able to override that. In the Kern district, for the most part, if it was part of apprenticeship, then we would normally just go ahead and register them, even if they had a balance. So, because it was part of apprenticeship, but not everybody will do that because there's a limit, right, on what they can override on fees. So.
Okay, so some of that's up to the individual college. And Sabrina, is CAI funds, can they be used for an apprentice who owes money other than registration?
Yeah, I just plugged in the chat the full list of allowable and unallowed expenses using high funding, and it gets a little bit tricky when it gets to student fees because really, in essence, if the fees are part of the apprenticeship program, then yes, they could potentially be funded. However, if they're fees that are maybe say from a bad debt outside of the apprenticeship program, more than likely it would not be permitted.
For CAI. So they'd have to find another fund source, or the college would have to agree to pay that if it's a bad debt, for instance.
Correct.
Okay. Foothill, do you ever, with a student that owes fees, do you have a different fund source, or do you pay any of those fees outside of registration?
So a lot of times we actually, when the student gets accepted into a registered apprenticeship program, we generally communicate that they have a hold from outstanding balance, and we can actually coordinate the information with the training program to ask the student to pay the tuition while we give the student time to pay it off. So we do override of when they first started at the program and register them into the classes, and we give them some time to pay off the bad debt or the outstanding balance from their before they join apprenticeship.
Thank you. So there's kind of a range of possibilities here, I think. I do know there's some colleges that cover debt with other funds. And you have the option of payment plans. Justin, with the LA groups, do you have anything creative around bad debt or paying for students?
I'll reference to when I was still at the college. So if I had a potential or prospective, I should say, registered apprentice who had, say, an outstanding fee balance from the previous year, automatically it will stop the student or any A&R technician from registering the student right away. There's usually some sort of permission. And then I would have to go to my dean of enrollment and request permission. And then, of course, the outstanding balance still remained. So that was still the responsibility of the student to resolve. But I couldn't just, at the director managerial level that I was at, I could not override and register a student without the permission of my dean.
To respond to Kelly questions, so when we schedule a class and the fee waiver is waived at the course level, all the students' enrollment fees and associated with enrollment fees will be waived, which is the whole fee, all the student body fee, whatever the fees would be. So they will automatically be waived once we check that particular box when we schedule that class.
Okay, and so other than health and enrollment, we have a question about other fees. So not bad debts, but other fees that colleges are assessing. I think the answer might be depends on college practice, but.
So once you check off the enrollment fee for the course, all the associate fee will be waived.
Yes, one thing, so anything that's eligible for apportionment can be waived. One thing that has been in discussion that I've seen across the state is, for example, the mandatory fees like the health fee, things like that equates like $10, like up to like $42, something like that, is if a college, if they are employed and they are receiving benefits from an employer, does the college still give that particular apprentice access to those other resources? So that's more of an internal discussion for individual colleges, but anything that's eligible for apportionment, including the mandatory fees, can be waived.
Okay, thank you so much. We are at time, and I think we've gotten to a lot of questions in the chat. All of these presenters have indicated a willingness to also answer questions further from this group, and their emails are on this PowerPoint. I do want to remind everyone that on the BACCC website under Regional Joint Venture, the Teacher Education project has their own website, and all of these PowerPoints, as well as the recording, are posted. This one will be there in about a week. I have to wait for the conversion of the recording. So all of our materials are available, and if anyone would like the PowerPoint sooner, just email me and I can send it to you. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists. If we can do a virtual hand clap. Thank you so much, and thank you all participants for being here, and let me know if you need this PowerPoint sooner.